The Home Valuation Code of Conduct by Andrew Cuomo, Attorney General of New York. Low appraisals are happening all over the United States on an arbitrary basis, and the credit goes to Andrew Cuomo. He wants to be governor of New York. He's got a political machine with 2,000 employees to use. He's giving off the image of a white knight investigating, saving a few $1,000,000. He has hundreds of investigations going on at the same time. It's almost a template for political investigations. Many end in code of conduct. Here we Google Andrew Cuomo investigation. It says 1 of 10 out of 148,000. That might be a little drastic for 148,000, but let's try page 10. Cuomo launches investigation against Espada. Let's try 28. I hope that some of these are more substantial and not as shallow as the Home Valuation Code of Conduct. Andrew Cuomo's investigation of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac started with a bang with many press releases. It ended with agreements of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to follow Mr. Cuomo's regulations. But it ended in fines, not prosecutions, that pale in comparison to the damage that was inflicted. It also put an end to prosecution of high-level executives, what kind of fraud was committed, and which politicians were benefiting from political contributions. The prosecution might uncover collusion of politicians that oversee the housing and finance at the federal level. When he was Secretary of HUD, 1997 to 2002, King Cuomo cost us billions of dollars. But you wouldn't believe that from what you read in his website. His website says that when he was Secretary of HUD, that, quote, under his leadership, HUD was transformed from a bureaucratic backwater rife with waste to a revitalized engine for housing development. But then he doesn't mention the Harlem scandal in his own backyard. Let's go back to 2001 in the HUD archives. Robert C. Groves was Assistant Inspector General for Investigation, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He was investigating HUD 203K rehabilitation loan fraud. The investigations were in Harlem. They cost the department tens of millions of dollars because of a combination of deception, collusion, and lax oversight. There was a high rate of default for the 203K program in New York City. One lender, there was loans of $77.8 million, and almost all were in default or foreclosure. Property flipping. The investors bought up hundreds of Harlem properties in various stages of repair. In a few days or sometimes hours, the investors picked up an immediate profit on the purchase and resale of the property. At times, these properties were a little more than an existing building foundation. Again, Cuomo's backyard. For an example of some of the things Andrew Cuomo spent money on was an article in the Post, Washington Post, in February of 2000. He said failed public housing leads to new $1.5 billion Chicago project. Seems they were going to tear down 51 decaying high-rise public projects and replace them with rehabilitated units. And, quote, whether the 1.5 million panout will succeed where policies of previous decades failed has yet to be seen. HUD Secretary Cuomo seemed to blame the abject and gigantic failure of the Chicago experiment on its high-rise nature. He went on to say that we're going to replace those that are there with something that works. The 16,000 old apartment units had to be replaced with 25,000 new units, mostly low density. He said they were going to replace 100,000 deteriorating public units across the country. The Chicago Mayor Richard Daley accused federal officials last year of denying him budget flexibility because he had threatened to expose waste and mismanagement at the Chicago Housing Authority while HUD was in charge, while Andrew Cuomo was in charge. In 1998, Cuomo was on a video talking about how they had increased the whole HUD budget to 50% for affordable housing. What a lot of people don't know is that the Secretary of HUD enforces Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac enforces their requirement of spending 50% on affordable housing. We're getting into the trillions of dollars here. Fannie Mae does 50% of all U.S. mortgages. Now, as the enforcer for HUD, Cuomo's affordable housing, risky loans, largely minority-owned housing. Cuomo failed to institute any additional regulations. It's no wonder that we were aiming, America's housing was aiming to hit the tip of the iceberg.